Hello, I'm Adrian from Neon Mushroom, and today we're going to be playing some Commander. Got an EDH gameplay video for you. Let's just jump into it and look at some opening hands and what decks everybody's going to be playing.
Alright, first up we got my buddy Jake playing his Tuvasa deck, and he unfortunately had to ship down to 5 cards, keeping 4 lands, Irrigated Farmland, Forest, Exotic Orchard, and an Island, and the one non-land that he did decide to keep was a Thassa, God of the Sea. Next up, we got my boy Guy Scott playing his Niv Mizzet deck, and he's keeping a 6-card hand including Cascade Bluffs, a Mountain, Snapcaster Mage, Propaganda, Negate, and Brainstorm. Next up, there's me. I'll be playing one of my personal favorites, Yuriko the Tiger Shadow, and I'll be keeping a Scalding Tarn, a City of Brass, Cephalid Coliseum, Tormented Soul, Mist Syndicate Naga, and a Perplex. Last but not least, we have Aiden playing his Lord Windgrace deck, and he keeps a 6-card hand of Forest, Cinderglade, Kangenslow, Casualties of War, Gamble, and a Swamp. So Guy won the die roll, so he's going to go ahead and lead on a Cascade Bluffs, passing to Jake, who's just going to put an Irrigated Farmland into play tapped. He's going to pass over to me. I'm going to go ahead and draw, play a Scalding Tarn, and then I'm going to go ahead and shock and fetch, grab a Watery Grave, tap it for a black mana, dropping Tormented Soul, and then I'll pass over to Aiden, and all he's going to do is draw a card and drop himself a Kangenslow to go with Jake's Irrigated Farmland. Passing to the second turn cycle, the guy's going to draw a card, and he's just going to drop an Island for turn, passing to Jake, who's then going to draw a card and just drop an Exotic Orchard as his land for turn, and then pass to me. I'm going to go ahead and draw. I'm going to play Cephalid Coliseum as my land for turn, and then I'm going to go ahead and attack Aiden with the Tormented Soul. When Aiden declares no blockers, because he has none, I'm going to ninjutsu in Yuriko for Tormented Soul. And then off the ninjutsu trigger, I'll reveal Umezawa's Jitte, and I'll deal 2 to everybody. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass the turn to Aiden, who will then on-tap, play a Cinderglade as his land for turn, and then just pass back to Guy. Guy's going to go ahead and draw a card for turn. He's going to drop a Mountain. He's going to tap out to cast his Propaganda, and that's all he has for turn, so he's going to pass over to Jake. After drawing for turn, Jake's going to go ahead and drop himself a Forest. He's going to tap out as well, and he's going to play Thassa, God of the Sea, and attempt to pass the turn to me, but Aiden has an action. He'd like to tap for 1 black and cast Vampiric Tutor, which will drop him down to 35 life. After tutoring a card to the top of his library, Jake will then be able to pass the turn to me. I will untap, and I'm going to go ahead and attack Aiden with Yuriko before playing my land. And Aiden can't block it, so he takes 1, and then off the top I'll reveal a Sunken Hollow. No one will take anything. Then I'll play Mutavault as my land for turn. I'll cast the Tormented Soul I used to ninjutsu in the Yuriko in the first place, and then I'll pass the turn to Aiden. Aiden's going to go ahead and untap and draw his card for turn, and the only action he has is to play a Forest for turn and pass, leaving me wondering what he tutored with that Vampiric Tutor. Guy's going to go ahead and untap his mana and draw a card. He's going to play an Island as his land for turn and just pass to Jake, doing blue player things, leaving 4 mana untapped, half of it's blue. Jake's going to go ahead and draw for turn, not before scrying off of Thassa first. I believe he scries to the top. And then he's going to go ahead and tap 1, 2, 3 mana to cast his commander. That's going to be Tuvasa the Sunlit. Now with Tuvasa in play, he's going to play an Abundant Growth onto his Forest, which is going to trigger Tuvasa, and he's going to be able to draw a card. And after drawing the card off of Tuvasa, he also draws a card for Abundant Growth entering play. And after that stage, he's going to go ahead and pass the turn over to me. I'm going to go ahead and untap, upkeep, and draw my card for turn. Then I'm going to play a City of Brass as my land for turn, and I'll tap my Cephalid Coliseum for blue mana, losing a life, to go ahead and activate my Mutavault. That'll give me 2 ninjas in play. Then we're going to go ahead and move to combat. I'm going to ship both ninjas in over at Aiden because he has no blockers, and I'll ship the Tormented Soul in at Jake because it's unblockable and he can't block it with his blocker. When no blockers are declared, I'll go ahead and ninjutsu in Mistblade Shinobi. Now Mistblade Shinobi has an ability when it deals damage to a player to bounce a creature that they control, so I'll go ahead and bounce his commander. Then I have 3 Yuriko ninjutsu triggers. I'll reveal Slitherblade for 1 damage, Ornithopter for 0 damage, womp womp. For the third one, I'll reveal a Fallen Shinobi, which will be 5 damage. That'll be 6 in total for Yuriko triggers for this turn. Then I'll tap my last mana, play my Slitherblade, and the Mutavault will cease to be a creature at end of turn. I will pass over to Aiden. Before taking his turn, he'll cast Realms Uncharted, getting Baziju Who Shelters All, Vesuva, a Field of the Dead, and a Dark Depths. This is a Gifts on Given like effect where a player will pick 2 to go to hand and 2 to go to the grave. Guy is the guy that picks, and he picks Viziju and Vesuva to go to Aiden's hand and the other 2 to hit the grave. Which is a pretty sick joke if you know how Lord Windgrace works as a commander. After untapping, Aiden's going to go ahead and draw a card, and he's going to drop a land for turn, which is going to be the Viziju who shelters all. And then he's going to go ahead and tap a red mana and cast a Gamble. His hand is then passed over to Mr. Guy Scott, who's going to pick out the card he discards to Gamble, and it does wind up being a forest, which I'm sure is best case scenario for Aiden here. After that point, he's going to try to pass the turn to Guy, but Guy does have an action before that happens. Guy's going to go ahead and tap 2 mana for some reason and cast the 1 blue mana spell, Opt. He's going to go ahead and look at the top card of his library, keep it, and then he's going to go ahead and move to his turn. Now that Guy's got his turn back, he's going to untap all of his lands, all 1 of them, draw a card for turn, and Guy really liked Aiden's play so much, he's going to tap a red mana and cast his own copy of Gamble. After searching up a card, he's going to pass it over to Aiden to return the favor. Aiden's going to go ahead and pick a card to discard, and the card that Aiden selects ends up being a copy of Brainstorm. So Guy's going to go ahead and discard that card. Then he's going to go ahead and play his land for turn, which will be an island, and then he's going to show us all what he gambled for because he's going to cast Anger of the Gods, and that's going to wipe my board, which, you know, makes me pretty sad. And he's going to go ahead and pass over to Jake. Jake's going to untap all of his lands, and then he has a Thassa trigger to resolve. He's going to scry the top card of his library to the bottom, and then I'll go ahead and draw a card for turn. Next up, he'll drop his land for turn, which will be a tapped Temple Garden, and then he'll tap 2 lands, and one of them green, so he can go ahead and cast Farseek. This Farseek's going to go grab another land from his deck. This one will be a Breeding Pool, his second shock into play tapped for the turn, and then I'll tap 2 more mana. Now the spell he casts here is Commune with the Gods. Commune with the Gods is going to let him look at the top 5 cards of his library, and he's going to be able to select any one enchantment and put it into his hand. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He winds up selecting Biden and Thassa to go to his hand. And an interesting thing I never knew about Commune with the Gods is it actually ships the rest of the cards to your graveyard, which can be quite good. Next up, I'm going to play a Sunken Hollow for turn, drop an Ornithopter, and then I'm going to go ahead and pass the turn to Aiden with no other actions. After untapping and drawing his card, Aiden's going to go ahead and drop a Swamp for turn. He's going to tap out, losing 2 to his Viziju who shelters all, to put Lord Windgrace on the stack. I'm feeling a little bit salty after that board wipe. I have to do some resetting, so I'm going to go ahead and take some pain from my lands and cast Perplex on his Lord Windgrace. Opting not to discard his hand, he'll allow it to be countered, and he will go ahead and pass to Guy. Guy's going to go ahead and untap all of his mana, and he'll drop an Exotic Orchard as his land for turn. And he's just going to tap all 6 of his lands and cast his commander, Niv Mizzet Parun, and he figures that's probably enough for 1 turn, so passes over to Jake. After untapping all of his lands, Jake will resolve the Thassa trigger and scry all the way to the top. After his top scry, he'll draw it for turn, and then because he's so lucky and has his Tuvasa in his hand after the trigger from my ninja, he'll be able to cast it from his hand for 3 mana. After casting his Tuvasa, he'll go ahead and tap 3 more mana, and he'll cast Overgrowth. Now he's casting it, which is going to trigger Tuvasa, that's going to allow him to draw a card. And then Overgrowth will actually enter the battlefield, and he's going to have it go onto an island. After adding it to island, he's going to go ahead and pass the turn over to me. Now I'm going to go ahead and untap my lands and draw for turn. Then I'll play Marsh Flats as my land for turn. I'm going to go ahead and fetch right now, paying a life to get a basic swamp and put it into play untapped. And then, in a classic case of blue misdirection, I'm going to start to play with my lands a little bit. I guess the goal here is to make sure that everyone is aware that I'm going to leave 2 blue mana up after I take my next action. Well, the action after next, because the next action is to attack Aiden with Ornithopter. Since he can't block, I'll ninjutsu in Fallen Shinobi, who, when it deals combat damage to a player, I get the top 2 cards of the library, and I can cast them without paying their mana costs. However, they wind up both being lands. Should have seen that coming since it's a Lord Windgrace deck. After that, I just drop the Ornithopter for free and pass to Aiden. Aiden's just going to go ahead and untap all of his lands and draw for turn. Having not a lot else to do, he's going to put a Temple of Malady into play tapped and scry the top card of his library to the bottom, passing over to Mr. Guy Scott. After untapping all 6 of his lands, Guy's going to get to draw the first card this game with Niv Mizzet Parun resolve, meaning he'll get to point a damage anywhere he likes, and in this case he'll point it at Tuvasa the Sunlit. Then he's going to tap 3 mana, transmuting Muddle the Mixture to go get a card with CMC 2. Unfortunately, the combo piece he wanted to get costs 3, he didn't realize this at the time, so he gets Treasure Hunt and then casts it. This is going to trigger Niv Mizzet. He's going to be able to point a damage at Ornithopter, however he does forget to draw the card unfortunately. He's going to go ahead and use the Treasure Hunt, he's going to reveal a mountain off the top, kind of a punt, and then he's going to go ahead and just play his mountain as land for turn and pass over to Jake. Jake's going to go ahead and untap all those lands and use Thuvasa's trigger to scry to the bottom. Then he'll draw for turn, after which he will carefully tap 3 of his lands, and he's going to cast the spell Plea for Guidance. But first, Niv Mizzet is going to trigger, Guy's going to draw a card, and he's going to go ahead and point that damage from Niv Mizzet right at my Ornithopter. Then Jake's going to get Imprisoned in the Moon and Estrid's Invocation, add those to hand, off of his Plea for Guidance, and put that in the graveyard. Then Jake will play Azorius Chancery as land for turn, bouncing a land to his hand, and then he'll tap 3 lands and play Shielded by Faith. That's going to trigger Tuvasa, he'll draw a card, and then Shielded by Faith attaches to Tuvasa, and he passes to me. Proceeding to my turn 7, I'll untap all my permanents and draw for turn. Then I'm just going to move straight into combat, moving in at Iden with the Ornithopter, and then I'll pay 2 for Propaganda so I can get in at Guy with my Fallen Shinobi. With no blockers declared, I'll go ahead and ninjutsu and Yuriko for the Ornithopter, putting 2 ninjas in the red zone, and that's going to trigger the Fallen Shinobi first. I'll get Baral, Chief of Compliance, and an island, which is very good because I can actually play the land for turn off of the Fallen Shinobi. Then Yuriko triggers twice, revealing Elder Deep Fiend and Insidious Dreams, dealing a grand total of 12 damage to everyone. After that point, I'll play Guy's land for turn, I'll play as Baral without paying his mana cost, redeploy my Ornithopter, and pass to Iden. Iden will just untap his land for turn, draw for turn, and then with not much else to do, he'll tap a swamp and somehow try to play Crucible of Worlds, realize it's not the card he wanted to cast, and drop Mana Vault. And then he'll just pass the turn to Guy. At the start of his 8th turn, Guy will use both of his hands and untap all 8 of his lands, and then before he goes to draw, I'm going to tap 2 mana. With that 2 mana, I'm going to go ahead and sacrifice Fallen Shinobi to use the activated ability of Elder Deep Fiend. When I cast this spell, I can tap up to 4 permanents and player controls, and I'm going to choose 4 of his blue sources. Now Guy sees that I'm trying to hold his mana down, so he floats all 4 of those sources, and he's going to kick the card into the Royal. This is going to target Baral, Chief of Compliance, and that's also going to trigger Niv Mizzet, so he draws a card and deals a damage to Ornithopter, gets his Baral back, draws for turn, puts that damage from Niv Mizzet on Ornithopter, and kills it. At this point, he'll drop land for turn, which will be a mountain, and then I'll tap 2 lands. He's going to go ahead and cast the card Arcane Signet. And then with the Arcane Signet in play, he'll tap that in addition to another land, leaving 1 blue up to cast the Baral, Chief of Compliance that I stole. Moving on to Jake's 8th turn, he'll untap his lands and scry with Thassa. After some careful deliberation, he'll leave that card on top and draw it. He'll deploy Exotic Orchard as land for turn, and then tap 1 green mana. This is going to be to cast Rancor. As it's an enchantment, it'll trigger Tuvasa. He'll be able to draw a card. After drawing that card, he'll attach the Rancor to Tuvasa. Then he'll tap some more mana, and he's going to cast Crufix's Insight. This is a sorcery spell, which triggers Niv Mizzet, draw a card, and point a damage at my face. Crufix's Insight will then resolve. He's going to reveal a whole bunch of cards off the top of his library. He's going to pick some enchantments to go to his hand, and the rest are going to hit the bin. He's going to pick Ethereal Armor, Utopia Stroll, and Archetype of Endurance. The rest will hit the bin. After that point, Jake's going to make a bit of a mistake, and he's going to cast Imprisoned in the Moon directly onto Yuriko. I'll cover why that's a mistake later in the game. Some of you might already know if you're more experienced Magic players. Then he'll tap some more mana and cast Estrid's Invocation. Guy will then sneakily tap 1 blue mana and cast Negate for its reduced cost off the side of the screen, and trigger Niv Mizzet, drawing a card, pinging me for a damage. After that point, Jake's going to go ahead and head right into combat, and he's going to come in at me with Tuvasa, and that's going to drop me down to 17. After that point, he'll pass to me. Moving on to me, I'll untap all of my lands, including, unfortunately, the Yuriko has been imprisoned in the moon. Use the Yuriko to activate my Mutavault, and then we'll move into combat. I'm going to ship in at Jake with both creatures, and with no blockers declared, I'm going to tap 2 and ninjutsu in Ingenious Infiltrator in place of the Mutavault. This is going to drop Jake down to 12 life, and then Ingenious Infiltrator will trigger once. I will draw a card. I'll drop the Mutavault as land for turn, and then I'll pass to Iden. Iden goes ahead and draws that card for turn, and then he's going to tap his Mana Vault and play a Crucible of Worlds. At this point, he's able to play lands from his graveyard, so he'll drop Field of the Dead, and this will trigger giving him a zombie. After that, I'll pass to Guy. Guy will draw for turn, triggering Niv Mizzet, pointing the damage at me, and then cast Snapcaster Mage. This will target Gamble, which he will cast, trigger Niv Mizzet, and point that damage at Jake, and then he's going to go ahead and gamble. He's going to search his library for a card, hide it in his hand, and then he's going to pass it over to Jake to pick 1 to discard. That's going to be a Steam Vents. Guy's going to go ahead and cast Mystical Tutor at this point. He's going to draw a card and deal damage to me off of the Niv trigger, and then he's going to put Force of Will on top of his library. At this point, he'll quickly sneak in a Cataxian Probe targeting me, paying 2 life, drawing the Force of Will, and then hitting me with the Niv Mizzet trigger, putting the Force of Will in his hand. After dropping a Polluted Delta, he'll go ahead and sacrifice it and grab himself an island. After getting that island, he will reinforce his role as the bad guy, tapping 3 mana to drop a Blood Moon. After that, he'll tap a blue mana to play his favorite combo piece, Curiosity, and then he'll tap 2 additional mana to cast Anticipate. This triggers Niv Mizzet, dealing the damage. This causes Curiosity to draw a card, creating an infinite loop. At this point, Aiden thinks he has the answer in Frozen Grip, but forgets that Niv Mizzet's abilities triggered one, and will just go infinite anyway. At this point, Guy goes infinite and wins the game.
Alright, well that was pretty fun. All things considered, I'd say the game went pretty well. Just to kind of like glaze over how everyone's performances went, how did their decks do what they wanted to do. I guess I'll start with the elephant in the room. Aiden's deck didn't seem to do a whole lot, the Lord Windgrace deck. It's a deck that requires a little bit of setup, a little bit of ramp, and he didn't really have a whole lot of that in the beginning of the game. I'm not sure what he was tutoring for throughout the whole game. I didn't have full access to hands, but I imagine that Frozen Grip was part of his plan. We kind of had a discussion about it in-game. He said he might have the answer to the Curiosity, and I told him, well, I don't think that's going to answer it the way you think it's going to answer it. And it didn't. It was kind of this is our first real game under camera with Guy's new Niv Mizzet deck. So we had a little bit of trouble there with a little bit of rules, I guess. But yeah, his deck, you'll be seeing a lot more of it if you continue to watch the channel. It's probably one of his favorite decks that he plays. I like playing against it. It's normally one of the more impressive decks in the pod, even though this video may not have brought that to light so much. Then Jake's deck did exactly what his deck's designed to do. It's kind of a Voltron enchantments deck, if you will. It's a solid deck. It did kind of what it wanted to do. I would say it was one of the weaker decks in the pod, just based on like raw power level, but the deck almost always consistently does the same thing. It has a very aggressively costed commander, and it's an engine-based commander, meaning, you know, if you do the thing your deck's supposed to do, your commander is going to reward you with card advantage. I think he did a pretty good job. I'll get to the mistake he made in a moment with the Imprison in the Moon. My deck did pretty much what I wanted it to do. I would say it was like a 6 or maybe a light 7 on like what it wants to be doing in terms of like a 10 being just like winning the game on turn 4 or 5. There were a few things that could have gone better for me. An early Anger of the Gods like that, when I'm caught with my pants down without a way to interact with it, kind of sucks. But I'm pretty happy with my deck's performance overall. And then Guy's deck obviously did exactly what it was supposed to do. He won the game on turn 9. It was awesome. A few things. First, I'll start with the whole interaction with the what was the name of it? Imprison in the Moon. For those of you who play Magic the Gathering and have been playing for a long time, this may have come up for you. You probably already know that Imprison in the Moon is an enchantment, and it's an aura. It's an enchant creature. You don't get to choose the target of it until you know it resolves. It doesn't target on the stack, right? So when he cast that, Guy was tapped down to 1 blue mana with his Niv Mizzet in play. And there's not a whole lot of ways to interact with that once it's down. Guy doesn't play a ton of bounce spells. So if he had cast Imprison on the Moon, that would pretty much shut down Guy's game plan for a good part of the game. And with Yuriko and Tuvasa being in the game doing what we do, it wouldn't be hard to close Guy out of the game if that resolved. So Guy probably would have negated it had he done it correctly and just cast the Imprison on the Moon. This is something we kind of caught after he already targeted my Yuriko. So he said, oh, we'll just continue with the game, because that's what he was going to target anyway. But for future games, and for anyone who didn't know like why that would be an issue, you're supposed to choose targets after the resolution, meaning that there was a good chance it would have been countered. And then the other big thing was the Frozen Grip at the end of the game, obviously. Curiosity and Niv Mizzet have a really messed up relationship with one another. And the Curiosity will allow you to draw a card whenever the creature deals damage. And this loops with Niv Mizzet's ability. You're just dealing damage and drawing cards. It doesn't stop. The only thing that can really stop it is like Nimble Obstruction just comes to mind. You could like stifle the ability without casting a spell. Frozen Grip won't do it though, because his ability is activated, so Split Second doesn't actually stop Niv Mizzet's activation from going on the stack. And continuing, adding infinite copies of that trigger onto the stack, with Frozen Grip buried all the way at the bottom. Kinda sucks, but that's why the Niv Mizzet combo is so good. Like you saw, it was in that game. And then, yeah, that's pretty much how all the decks went. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry about the long period since my last uploads. There's like 50 subscribers. You guys can't care yet, right? As long as I start uploading now and keep uploading, no one will even know the difference. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.